Welcome to The Sound, KQAL FM's weekly behind-the-scenes look at Midwestern-made music. From writing and recording to distribution and promotion, The Sound is your source for new releases and exclusive interviews from Midwestern artists. Support for The Sound is made possible by a grant from the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Rolling. Tonight on The Sound, we bring you Forgiveness, the latest album from Winona artist Blunt Blade. This new album from Blunt Blade combines so many different genres and sounds, it'll make your head spin. But in a fun way. Seriously, it's a good thing. Don't get too dizzy. Maybe sit down if you do, okay? So, if you like music, there's bound to be something on this album for you. From progressive to rock to electronic to the ends of the earth to the moon and beyond. And did I mention that it was mastered at the famous Abbey Road Studios? I'm Bill Stoneberg saying get ready for Winona's own Blunt Blade with their newest album titled Forgiveness, tonight on The Sound.
Time has come. The stage is set.
That was Sprawling, and that's the first track from the latest album from Winona artist Blunt Blade, and the album is titled Forgiveness. And I have Blunt Blade in the studio with us tonight. How are you doing?
Hey, doing well. Thanks for having me again here.
For sure. So we featured you on the show a while back with your first self-titled album. So bring us up to speed. How's life been? What have you been up to? And how's this new album come together?
Yeah, so it's been a bit of a road. It's always interesting how things kind of change or things differ from the first album to the next album and the progression that you go through in order to get the next release out. And for me, the self-titled album was elaborate, took a lot of emotion to put into it. And you go through the whole process, and then there's naturally kind of a break where you're just like, okay, well, let me step back for a minute. And the reason why that is you almost have to put yourself into a different mode when you're writing and you're recording, and you're doing some pre-mix things. You're in your mode of creativity, and you're scrutinizing what you've done, and you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I make it better, that kind of thing. Once you send it off to the person who mixes it, and eventually the person who masters it as well, you start shifting a little bit into a different mode, because you start to think about things like promotion and releasing, and am I going to do physical copies? Am I going to do CDs or vinyl? And who am I going to work with? If I'm going to work with somebody when it comes to promotions, is it going to be self-promoted? Is it going to be something that I pay somebody to promote or help me promote, or an amalgam of the two, where you kind of do both? And what am I going to do when it comes to playlist pushing? Am I going to push it onto Spotify, digital distribution, all of those different things? So you kind of shift your brain focus into a different area then, because then you're more into the organization and the releasing and all of those things.
Right.
And so that's where I am right now. I'm looking at promotions and things like that. Releasing was just recent. There's a music video we've done for one of the songs. And there's quite a bit. So, but a lot of it is what you put into it too. You don't have to do these things. And if you're not an indie artist, usually you have people that do these things for you. Which, holy cow, man! Like there's so much to it if you want to put in a lot of work to it.
Right.
So. You kind of get out what you put into it, and I could totally understand where it would take a team of people to do it effectively. But at the same time, I'm just an indie music guy here, so I'm trying to do what I can with what I have, as well as balancing what the budget would be on it, because it's self-funded, and it can get really expensive if you want it to.
Right. Well, yeah, and you have vinyl coming out too, right? So
yeah. So the vinyl's released as well. There's some special edition vinyl it did. So this is kind of fun, because I'm a big vinyl head, so I was just waiting to do it. And this time, last time we didn't do vinyl for the self-titled release, and this time I'm just like, what the heck? I might as well just release it on vinyl at the same time as we do CD and digital distribution. And so we went with Third Man Pressing to do this, or the Jack White owned pressing plant.
Yeah.
So they're in Detroit, and they've just been incredible to work with. But the releases we have a few test pressings that are available to buy. There's 50 of a double eclipse color vinyl, where they're signed and numbered, and then there's 200 numbered of an opaque blue that are out there as well. So available to buy at bluntblademusic.com. But yeah, I just I couldn't. Even though it's expensive, I couldn't argue against myself when I thought about it.
Nice,
you think with it's one of those brain things. Like my analytical brain was like, "Geez, that's expensive. Don't do it. It's going to be so much money."
Yeah.
And then my right brain's like, "Well, gosh, you're a vinyl head.
Cool.
You know what vinyl means to people who listen to music. So just do it. Just spend the money. It'll be okay long term."
Right. For sure. You'll enjoy it. It's we'll all enjoy having the vinyl, and it's a cool thing. There's a lot to unpack, right? There's a whole bunch. There's a lot to do. So that first tune, actually, I want to kind of get into the tunes here. Reminds me of like the way it starts out. I think for sure, kind of maybe points me in this direction, but like 70s, 80s horror films,
Sure, yeah.
And I don't know if you're familiar with the Italian film Suspiria.
Oh, yes, yeah.
The band Goblin that did the soundtrack.
Yep.
Is any of that stuff ever an influence on you? Was that something you intentionally thought about, or did that just kind of happen?
So it's interesting. So some of these songs there are direct influences on, and others are not. They're more of what I would call just more like a subconscious influence.
Sure.
So we're all influenced. At least I believe we're all influenced music-wise, or by anything, but specifically in this context, by the music that we've listened to throughout our lives, and what has the most meaningful or impactful feelings that we derive from the music that we listen to. What kind of hits our soul and what we really, really feel deeply. And those are the things that stay with us. So whether we're consciously trying to write something that sounds similar or is in the same vein of some of those things or not, all of those influences do contribute towards what comes out when you're trying to be creative. At least that's kind of the way that it works for me. So there wasn't any direct influence from that specifically, but I'm sure that amongst other things like, influences like, I could hear, when I listened to it back, I could hear influences from like the band Metric or Silver Sun Pickups, or even to a slight degree like Muse or some variations of Smashing Pumpkins. There's things like that, and these are bands I've loved for a long time. So all of those influences I think directly come in, as well as some heavier stuff too, because that song, as well as a few of the other songs in this album, are a little heavier than what was on the first LP.
Right, yeah, definitely. Especially these first couple tunes, I think lie on the heavy side a little bit. Well, let's get into some more tunes, and then we'll come back and talk some more. I'm here talking to Blunt Blade tonight, and the new album is called Forgiveness. It comes out towards the end of the month here in June 2025. Let's hear another track from it. This next track is the second track in the album, and it's called Justified, and you're listening to it on The Sound on 89.5 KQAL. That was Justified, and that's the second track on the new album by Blunt Blade from right here in Winona called Forgiveness. And Forgiveness is coming out towards the end of the month here in June, so we're getting a nice little preview of it here. And we have Blunt Blade in the studio with us tonight. So, okay, boy, like we said, there's a lot to unpack here. We started talking about influences. We opened that can of worms a little bit. And there's a lot of... You can hear there's a lot of variety in the album, at the same time, it's got a consistent sound. It's obviously you, right? And it all fits together. But there's obviously a wide variety of influences. There's a variety of sounds and styles here that come together. I hear a lot of electronic instrumentation, perhaps mixing with like electric guitars, maybe. The first few tunes, especially for me in this way, Justified, this last one here, reminds me of one of my favorite bands, actually, The Faint. And I don't know, we probably talked about this last time, did we?
Yeah.
I absolutely love them. And I also hear like prog rock, jazz fusion, like all kinds of stuff coming together here. We touched on this a little bit, but do you think... as a whole, how do you think about the sound of the album? Like before we turn the mics on, there was a song that you said almost didn't make it on the album. When you step back and you're doing all of this yourself, or as an indie artist, how do you think about the album as a whole and how to, what goes into it and what doesn't make the cut and, the overall feel and order? Like, how does that process come together for you?
Yeah, so it's really, there's a lot of subjectivity to it, of course. I'm looking at it and I'm listening to it. I'm trying to figure out, what might make the most sense within the context of the album, but also what might make the most sense that I'm happy with. If I'm not happy with something, and particularly if I'm not, when it's towards the end, I should say that, because a lot of times when you're writing a song, it develops as you write it, and sometimes it ends up changing. Sometimes, just minor changes because only minor changes are necessary. But in some cases, it might change significantly from the beginning or early stages until the end. So it's really it's all of those things. It's like, hey, what's going to fit within the context of the album, and what am I happy with? I'm not so concerned if something sounds a little different or it's a little obscure, because I do like that. I do like, one of my favorite bands is Ween, and if you listen to their albums, they just, from beginning to end, like they've got something that sounds like Steely Dan to something that sounds like Prince to something that sounds like Motorhead.
Twists and turns.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, and then they've got an Irish tune in there. It's just, they just throw so much in there, and to me that makes it more interesting and more creative. So, and obviously I'm not anywhere near to that creative level or that, amount of disparate songs that are on this record, but so I'm not opposed to that. It's just a matter of if I'm okay with how they turn out towards the end or when they're getting close to completion, or if the bones of them are too firm and I can't change it to make it better,
to make it fit.
Then I'll probably just disregard it. So there's some disregarded tunes that are 3/4 of the way done that I just kind of abandoned, and I might go back to them later to see if I can do something with them. But they weren't turning out as well as I wanted to. But Justified. In particular, we kind of talk about sometimes how songs come about. This was a real interesting one because anyone who writes music, I shouldn't say anyone, but I assume this is the way that most people write music. There's inspiration hits at weird times when you're, you might just be sitting there. For me, it's really interesting. I get inspired most of the time. The inspiration comes when I'm in the middle of a workout. If I'm working out, I don't know if it's because the blood's flowing, and my brain is getting more oxygen. I have no idea what it is, but that's usually the time when something, I'll just start humming something will just come to me, which makes it difficult because then I have the decision of, do I stop my workout midway between and go into the recording area and start recording stuff, or do I try to hum it to myself and remember it? But neither here nor there. This one though, when it came to the last track, this was a little bit different. That one came to me when I was in the shower. Okay. So I was in the shower and I just started humming the bass line, and I knew I felt something that it was driving, and it was something that was going to be good. So what I did then is, obviously I was in the shower, so I had to sit there and hum it to myself, the rhythm and the chord progression of the bass line. I hummed it to myself for the next 10 minutes, until I was able to get out quickly and get to the recording equipment and lay it down quickly. And that's all I did. I just laid down the bass line, because I was like, that's the foundation. I need to get it in there. It feels good. It builds,
Right.
you know, and that's really what I like in music I listen to too. I like stuff that builds a bit and comes
sure.
to, you know, like more of a climax and then comes back. That thematic or dramatic type music is really some of my favorites that are out there. But it's not, you know, like the only favorites. I love, you know, just straight up rock tunes too.
Right.
But this one I felt could really fit that model. You know, I felt it could build a bit.
Cool.
So that was kind of how that one worked out. But yeah, it's just unusual how it works. And sometimes, you know, you're just sitting down at a piano and you're just playing stuff out and you come across a really cool lick or you know, a really cool hook and you're like, well, that's kind of cool. You know, maybe I'll save that and do something with that. But I've made mistakes in the past with that as well. I've thought I had something that was really cool that came out, and then I realized it was the exact bass line from a song that I've loved for years. And I'm like, wait a minute, I can't use that.
Right.
You know,
Totally.
without realizing it. You know what I mean?
Seep in, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right? That's funny. How about as like a whole, as a whole? Because this album, it seems to me, I'm just so you know, I'm a little slow on lyrics. Like those, for some reason the rhythm section sticks out to me, and for some reason is a silly thing for me to say. I was a bass player for many years.
Oh, sure.
You know, so the rhythm section is what kind of draws me in a lot of times for tunes. But this album to me, my first few listens, it seems like there's a theme going on here and a story kind of, you know, stuff. How do you go about that and that kind of decision making in these early stages of these songs, like inspiration stage and stuff like that? Are you thinking yet about like how will this fit in with these other batch of tunes, or are you just like, I'm going to write the song and then we'll see what happens and see if it fits? Like, how does that, you know?
It's more the latter. You know, it's writing the song and see if it will fit in. And some cases they do, and some cases they don't. Like, for example, there's a couple of songs on here that don't really fit the main theme. They're actually kind of their own story, their own narrative. But it was one where I liked the songs well enough and felt that they sounded at least similar enough to the rest of the songs that they would fit fairly well. And again, that whole, if it's a little bit more disparate, I'm not completely opposed to it as long as I'm okay with it.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, this last song has it has a narrative theme behind it. You know, it's really about, and this is actually true with the upcoming video when it's released as well. We actually have a story that we're telling in the video, as well as some, you know, just some shots of me playing instruments and things like that out in an open field, which is kind of fun.
Cool.
But the story of the video, which fits the lyrics of the video, is really more or less, it's almost like a moral. And what it is it's about striving for and achieving success at any cost, at the cost of your relationships with your close, you know, loved ones. Like in the story of the video, it's you know, the main character has issues with his wife because he's spending all his time and his efforts on the success of his business life. And he's climbing the company ladder, doing some great things, but he's becoming you know, through the course of the video, obviously it's a 5-minute video, so there's only so much you can tell, but through the course of the video, he's becoming more arrogant, more of a jerk, more selfish. Right. And then at the end of it, he's left with his success, but he's left when all his family and his friends have left him. So it's a moral story, and I'll talk about this in a minute, but it's interesting how that one kind of came about, and I didn't write the song. The song was not written with the intention of, okay, I'm going to write a moral or something like that, or a warning of being too selfish or being too self-involved. That wasn't the idea. Like, I didn't set out to do that. That developed after the music was already written, after the melody and harmony lines were written, and I was writing the lyrics, and it just made sense. You know, it's one of those where, okay, well, you know, like, how am I going to start this out? I'm like, okay, so I started out and I started writing some things. I'm like, okay, well, this fits with the theme of the song, with the feel of the song. And that all kind of fell together just at the end. So it wasn't an intentional thing from the start. It just developed into that, which is, honestly, that's a lot of the ways that most of these songs are. They'll start out maybe with a musical theme, but the idea or the narrative behind the lyrics and whatnot develops after the music is written, and then what the feel of the song is. So it's an interesting process, because it's I always like to hear about that as well. You know, how are people creating their lyrics, and you know, So let's say, for example, that I were to write a concept album, I were to put something like that out. That takes a lot of upfront thought because you need to lay out the outlines of the story of it, and then you can understand where the story begins, how it develops, and where it ends at the end. And there's some of that within the individual songs here that developed, but I didn't set out with that at the beginning of the album to say, okay, we're going to create this very elaborate and convoluted story, or even an implicit story either. 'Cause sometimes there's an implicit, even though there usually are implicit themes that permeate. But yeah, that's just kind of the way that it worked out.
They just developed that way.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's get back into some tunes here. We'll play some more songs for folks. I'm here talking to Blunt Blade tonight. The new album, Blunt Blade's from right here in Winona. The new album's called Forgiveness, and it comes out here at the end of June sometime, so very soon. This next track is called Helpless, and you're listening to it on the Sound on 89.5 KQAL. That was Helpless, and that's a track off the latest album from Blunt Blade called Forgiveness, and that album's coming out in the next couple weeks here, by the end of June here in 2025. And we have Blunt Blade in the studio with us tonight. So we talked about your writing process, and how the songs come together and stuff like that. How about the recording process? I think we've alluded to, you doing a lot of stuff yourself. Did you play everything on the album, or are there any other players? How do you lay the stuff down? How do you create it?
So it's all me. Although I have been considering, I do have some other friends kind of doing their own thing too. We've been talking about potentially doing some collaboration things in time here.
Cool.
But this one was pretty much all me, with exception to, a few, sometimes you get some tips from other folks. You're playing the track, say, hey, what does this need? I'm kind of struggling here. I know it needs something, but can you help me out with it? But from the recording process, it was me on all the instruments and the instrumentation.
Okay.
It was, like we talked, I think, a little bit about this last time. It's kind of laying track down, track by track.
Right.
After you have the bones, and then maybe cutting some sections up a little bit. Going back to Sprawling, there was a section in there that was originally going to be in the final track on the album, originally going to be in Forgiveness.
Wow.
It's the guitar section where I play some double guitars and stuff like that in there. I was going to throw that into Forgiveness, and Forgiveness is a long song.
Right.
Forgiveness is 10.5 minutes long.
Right.
And I'm like, well, it's a long, more one of those dramatic type, epic type, almost like a prog type song.
Right.
And I could probably cut it back a bit, because I don't need to be, as long as like, Rush does, or Yes does, or, Dream Theater does, or, even Tool on their most recent album, they've got some really, really long tracks too, which they're all awesome. But
cool.
Number one, I'm not anywhere near that level of excellence, but I did want to cut it back a little bit. I'm like, Sprawling needs a little bit extra. It needs that section, so I kind of cut it out, and then I developed it to sound a little bit more like within the confines of what Sprawling should sound like too. So
right, cool. So everything. So you kind of it sounds like writing and recording are kind of melded together, and you let the songs kind of evolve the way they need to, and then figure out how to arrange them and put them together.
It's wonderful and excruciatingly frustrating all at once, because you are just going through and you're listening to the what you're recording or what you've recorded, and you're being. I'm a super perfectionist, and if I'm off, like when I'm playing something, if I'm off by just a little bit, I get really aggravated with it.
You're a tough band leader to play for yourself for, right? Like,
yeah. So like I'll be listening to it, I'm like, geez, I was too fast on that one. I got to go back and record it. I was too slow on that one.
Right.
I was too sloppy on that one. It's just so it's excruciating, but at the same time, I want it to sound as best as it possibly could. And some of the stuff, like I'm not friggin' Yngwie Malmsteen, on the guitar.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm not a shredder.
Right.
I can play, I'm an average to above average player on the guitar. That's what I consider myself. So I can do some things, but I'm not sitting here ripping across the fretboard.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
Totally.
So because of that, it takes a little bit more practice in some cases to get these things, where I want them to be.
Okay, cool. So that's a lot of hats to wear, right? And I don't know how you keep your head on straight when you got to listen, when you got to be all the players. You have to be everyone in the band, plus the producer, plus the engineer. That's a lot. It's a lot to do. How about live shows? Because I know you've been playing out live a bit here. How does that work for you? And is that just you, or do you bring other people there, or is it you and some machines? What kind of machines? What are you doing?
Yeah, so it's real interesting, because it's trying to play the balance between. At the end of the day, I want the song to sound like it does in the album. You know what I mean?
Okay,
I want
sure.
I want the performance to be where, because that always bothered me when I was a kid. When I was going to see shows and stuff like that, and you go see somebody live, and they would sound not great, and not anywhere close to what the album is. Now, you want the live experience to be more, because you want it to be more fulfilling. You want to feel it while you're there. You want to feel that bass like you haven't felt before. You want to feel it in your chest. You want to feel that kick drum. There's so many things that you want to experience more. You want the performer to perform, as closely as possible, with exception to the type of music. I mean, if you're out seeing Fish, obviously, you're looking at jam band.
Sure.
You want to see.
Yeah, they're
wanna,
stretching it, right?
Exactly.
They're stepping
Yeah.
out.
And that's what's fun about that band. And there's bands like that they obviously have a place, and that's why you kind of go to see some of those bands that do more of that type of stuff. And I used to I saw Fish many times, and
Cool.
I used to love them years ago. But anyway, so like where I'm going with this is, like in the live performance field, it kind of depends on the songs that I'm doing for what I will use for pre-recorded tracks to have those playing along with me while I'm playing either bass or guitar and singing at the same time. And some of it depends on how complicated the parts might be as well. For example, if there's a really complicated bass line while I'm singing a different complicated rhythm over the top, I'm nowhere near the level of Sting. I can't, throw some really wild syncopated rhythm on the bass while at the same time.
Oh, sure. Right. Singing.
Exactly. I'm fairly okay at it. I can do some things, which is like what I've done so far.
Right.
So that I do, and I haven't so far to date. I've got some people in my back pocket who are willing to come in.
Cool.
I've got a drummer who said he'd be willing to sit in if he wanted me to do that. I've got another bass player. I don't have a guitar player, but as you know, guitar players are a dime a dozen. I could probably find one pretty easily.
Right.
So if I needed someone to come in and play some complicated guitar parts while I'm singing, we could do that too. And then keyboards as well. Like sometimes I'll throw in keyboards, and I'll mix between the keyboards and the guitar, or keyboards and bass, because sometimes there's a different lead keyboard being played at a different part.
Time. Sure.
So it's a little easier in that regard. So really, it's about the song.
Right.
It's about what do I need, and then there's some really unique sounds and things like that which you just can't duplicate live.
Right.
And particularly on this album, there's like some reverse sounds that I threw in when I recorded it.
Sure.
And those type of sound effects and things like that are more unique. I mean, those you have to have kind of going in the background in order to sync up with the live performance. So yeah, it's definitely a balance to try to get it. But then of course the vocals. I mean, I'm singing the vocals. What I mean?
Right. And that's the important part, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one of the most in the front forward things, right? Well, that's interesting. That's cool. So maybe in the future we'll see a live band version of this.
Yeah.
That'd be super cool. Excuse me. And it's interesting you mentioned the sound effects and stuff too. I've recently been on I've recently been revisiting Pink Floyd's The Wall, and the entire thing, from the film to the live shows they did to the how they put it together, how it was written. And they did a lot of those soundtracks. It was actually, I think it started before then, maybe with Dark Side or something, where they were doing sound effects on a tape loop. So they had to play it the same every night in order for those sound effects to line up. So I'm like, wow, that's some dedication there. So thank God for computers today, right?
For sure. So you mentioned Pink Floyd. So Pink Floyd were probably one of the biggest, earliest influences on me.
Cool.
And The Wall album in particular, between my 9th and 10th grade year, the summer, I listened to that album probably 5 times a day minimum. I couldn't get enough of it. And then I found out there was a film behind it. And then I started watching that. I was, this is funny. So I used to go around on my bicycle to my friends' houses and be like, you got to see this movie. You got to see this movie. I was so eager to show it to everybody I possibly could, because I was just so into it. And obviously that was years after it, originally was released, but it was like I was discovering this gem that, my friends at the time didn't know anything about, so I wanted them to experience it as well. But for sure, all of those, the early, I'd say mid-career Pink Floyd stuff is probably more of an influence than the early career. But, Dark Side of the Moon for sure, but The Wall was the big one. And then the other big one was Animals.
Oh, sure.
Animal. To this day, I can still put, Animals vinyl on and listen to it and just love it.
Awesome. As far as the new album Forgiveness, it comes out later this month, sometime at the end of June here. Will there be physical copies available, CDs, vinyl? I mean, we already kind of alluded to that. We already said there would be vinyl.
Yeah.
Where can people find out about that and shows and things like that? Where should people go? What's the best place?
Yeah, so CDs and vinyl, posters, merch like cups and shirts and all that stuff. It's all available on my website. Shirts and cups and all that type of stuff is available to order and ship now.
Okay.
CDs and vinyl they're available to order now. They just won't ship until the
Pre-orders.
exactly
Okay.
until
Sure.
the album's actually released. But yeah, definitely worth checking out the physical copies if you're kind of old school or you just like to have. I like that. I just like to have something. I like the digital distribution. I've got Spotify
totally.
lists and everything.
Totally.
But I always like to have, for whatever reason, the physical copy.
Yeah, it's fun to have, right? It's
yeah,
fun to have. So do you have a website then, Blunt Blade, or
so
where?
bluntblademusic.com
Okay.
is the website, and you can head over there. That will also have some, it has a live performance on there. It's got, information if you want to download
Cool.
the tracks, or if you want to there's like links to Spotify, but then the merch and lyrics, all the lyrics are out there on there. And then just some other, artist bio information and basic stuff you see on most musicians' websites.
Cool. What's next on the horizon for you? Do you have plans for like some shows, maybe some release shows, stuff like that?
Yeah. So there's a couple of fun things. So I'm actually going to be doing I'm going to go up to actually quite a bit of the area here. I'm going to go in Wisconsin. I'm going to go up to the Twin Cities. I'm going to be working with some record stores.
Oh, cool.
And putting these CDs and records will be available at local record stores throughout Wisconsin and the Twin Cities area.
Nice.
But I'm going to be working with them. Maybe a little bit of merch. We'll kind of see how that goes. I haven't decided whether I'm going to give them some shirts and stuff like that to sell as well. But that's going to happen here probably in the very near future. So if you don't want to order it on the website and ship it, you can certainly go to some of these local record stores and absolutely support the local record stores. And from my standpoint, I'm giving them the records and CDs because I do want to support those folks. I'm not trying to make money off that. I really want those guys to make the money when they do the sale. So if you agree with supporting your local record stores, by all means go there, because they'll be retaining 100. Well, it'll be not only the profits, they'll 100% of the sales, because they won't have any cost associated to it. So. One's on my website. Obviously, I make a little bit of money on it. Mostly, it's just making the money back for how much it costs to do.
It,
so, but yeah, for sure, that's coming out. When it comes to performances, right now I've got one slated here for the end of August at El Maro Vineyard.
Okay.
It's in Trempealeau, I believe, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
That one will be August 24th. And it will be within the 1 to 4. I'll be performing with some other musicians. It'll be within the 1 to 4 p.m. window.
Cool. Okay.
Subject to change, of course, between now and then. But for now, that's the next one for an actual live performance.
Nice. And you'll have other people playing with you too?
I don't know yet.
Oh, you don't know yet? Okay.
Yeah, we got to kind of throw it together to see if it's.
It'll be a surprise.
From the standpoint of playing like my music with me, other folks will be playing. Their own music and things like that. So it's usually a great event.
Cool. Sounds good. We'll have to check that out. So August 24th, 2025. Go check it out. Blunt Blade at El Maro. So in the interest of time, because we gotta get this going and get this last tune in here. We've been talking to Blunt Blade tonight. The new album's called Forgiveness. It comes out sometime in the next few weeks here, towards the end of June here. And this last track, we're just going to give people a taste because it is 10 minutes long. But it has a lot of twists and turns, lots of, we might say, movements, perhaps,
Sure, sections,
Opus came to mind, listening to it. And one of the influences, actually, that you had mentioned, Muse comes to mind in this tune a lot for me, too. Some of the piano stuff towards the end, where the piano's trading off with the guitar and the piano's doing some arpeggios. It really struck me as kind of Muse-like, which is one of my favorite bands from that time period. So
I loved them for a long time.
Yeah, great band. So any last thoughts about this tune you want to tell people about? I mean, there is a lot in this song,
This one.
Any
sure.
brief comments?
So this one for sure. It is a long song. It took a while to develop, and this one was a longer one to write and kind of create the different sections. But in the end, I did really like it. I do hope other folks like it. It does take. It's one of those, like any long song that you would listen to from like more of a prog group. You have to kind of let it develop, and you have to be a little patient. But then usually there's a lot of payoff. And I found that those songs, for me at least, those songs that are longer and they have multiple sections, those are the ones that stick with me longer, and the ones that I like to listen to for greater periods of time. In some cases, I like some of those songs for years and years and years, just because there's so much to discover.
Right. Cool. Wow. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot in it. There's a lot that goes into this. So, well, let's play it for folks. And then thank you. Thank you for coming in today.
Thanks so much for having me. Look, and I got to say thanks that you guys do this for local artists. I mean, it's really awesome. You know, there's a ton of us out there, and you know, all of us are looking just to gain some exposure and to have our stuff break
and
through.
Share this stuff with people, right? Yeah. That's my favorite thing is passing this along to folks and getting people into stuff, connecting fans with bands, right?
Yeah,
you know?
for sure.
So very cool. Well, thank you so much. This last tune, like we've kind of alluded to it here, talked about a little bit about it. This last tune is called Forgiveness. It's the title track. The album's called Forgiveness. It comes out within the next 2 weeks here at the end of June, 2025. It's by Blunt Blade from right here in Winona, and it's good stuff. And this last tune, like I said, Forgiveness. It's the title track. And you're listening to it on the Sound on 89.5 KQAL.
To heal is a wounded heart that's been concealed with words. I accept the fate. No time to account for buried hate. No one is here alone. But another hide. There is no home. With time, things progress. The space retain memory, providing grace. Till now, conceptual disdain. Progress, envious thoughts will remain. Longing for a time when things were once given grace to hope and peace.
Thanks again to Blunt Blade for joining us tonight on The Sound. To hear more from Blunt Blade, just go to bluntblademusic.com, Bandcamp, or your favorite streaming service. For more deep dives into local and regional albums, tune into The Sound every Wednesday night at 6, right here on 89.5 KQAL. You can also listen to past episodes of The Sound on your favorite streaming services. Find links at KQAL.org. I'm Bill Stoneberg, and we've just heard from Winona's own Blunt Blade on The Sound. Thanks for listening to The Sound. The Sound is produced by KQAL-FM on the campus of Winona State University. Visit us online at KQAL.org. Theme music for The Sound provided by Mike Terrell of Fires of Denmark.